Welcome to Moments with Marianne. Allow me to interrupt your train of thought with something that may be one of the most interesting things you hear today. This is Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest Jacob Cooper, who's here to share with us his new book, Life After Breath: How a Brush with Fatality Gave Me a Glimpse of Immortality. So let's welcome to the show, Jacob Cooper.
Marianne, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be a guest on your show.
Well, I am honored that you're here. My goodness, your book is just making such an impact and a way for people. And I have to ask, what inspired you to write this book now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we could get into this in a little bit, but when I had my near-death experience, I know the inspiration from light, saved me, from suffering and death. And I think right now, inspiration is the oxygen of our times. We need it. And life after breath is just meant to inspire people to just know that they are so much more than the outside world and their experiences here on this in this life and on this earth, beyond their wildest dreams and imagination.
Well, I am excited that you wrote this book because I felt it personally touched me reading it. There's so much that I could gain from reading this, and why don't you share a little bit about your near death experience because it's so remarkable, especially being able to have a NDE at such a young age.
Yeah, yeah. I had mine, at the age of 3 years old, in September of 1993, as a result of suffocating due to whooping cough. And I went to a playground, with family friends, and climbing up a ladder onto a slide, it just began to suffocate. And, after losing my breath of my physical body, I was able to regain the breath of eternity, the breath of my soul. And, once I suffocated, physically, I just became reaware and reawakened to this eternal breath that we're all bestowed with. And, in my near-death experience, which I chronicle in Life After Breath a bit more, I, had a lot of classical, experiences of common near-death experiencers, that included but not limited to awareness of my own spirit guides, angels, karma, as well as my own, soul's purpose, awareness of what I could best describe as the all that ever is and ever was, the, uh, endless apex of creation is as God, and much more. And it was a familiar, yet euphoric, uplifting, out of this world experience that will never leave me and can never leave me.
Oh, that is just a remarkable, especially remembering that at 3. But, souls are never, we gain information, but I don't think we really kind of get old, in quotes. So when you left your body, was it like the all-knowing you from all of your past experiences that came out, or was it, just was it something else?
I think we all have an inner awareness from the time that we're born, that we could, I guess, call our soul. It takes time for the soul to get acclimated in the personality in this body. But beyond this ego, beyond this personality is a timeless soul. It just filters through different experiences, different genders, different cultures and time frames, through its evolution, through its expansion. And so having this experience, I was able to really get in touch into the depths of my soul beyond the personality as 3-year-old Jake. And this awareness transcended not only this lifetime, but it also, I was privy to awareness of, what you could best describe as past lives or, lives before this lifetime. But then again, that's speaking to the left brain. I was in a timeless field where there was no past, present, future, was all just unfolding, which is something that the linear mind, isn't adept to handle or process. But it was a timeless, unlimited consciousness that I was able to engage with.
It's so remarkable. I mean, I know that you connected with your spirit guides and you had this just remarkable experience. What was it like when you were there? What did it feel like for you?
It was a tremendous swing of polarization and diametric differences. In moments before that, in linear time, I was suffocating and I felt the most traumatized, the most afraid, that you could possibly have. We just don't think of it, unless you're on life support or breathing support. Without our breath, what are we, in this body? That keeps us alive in many ways. And so to have that taken from me felt like suffering from, an eternity, kind of like what Eben Alexander experienced in this, Dr. Eben Alexander experienced in his incubational period of suffering. But then you know, I was able to experience the exact opposite, moments later. And once I was able to utilize the power of surrender and letting go and, just embracing the light was when, I was able to transcend suffering and have it return to the nothingness that it really is, because at the end of the day, we come from this all powerful, all knowing beautiful light and we go to it and everything else is just temporary, tricks of the mind or turbulence, but we always return back to home.
So, what was it like when we talk about coming back down? What was it like for 3-year-old Jacob when you came back down to earth?
It was very awkward. It was very difficult. Um, my mother told me that in the hospital bed, I became so enraged that a couple of days later, I literally kicked my doctor, and I was so furious, which is really, you know, kind of common for the intensified trauma that I had from suffocation, but also the feelings of suffocation that I had and not being able to articulate, or to convey, or to have the vernacular descriptive words of what I had, as well as that kind of pedestal, this all knowing that I had, on my mother, and just understanding that there was information and an experience that I had that she wasn't aware of, where I maybe at the time couldn't be aware of. And so it was just kind of weird where I saw my mother as my biological mother and someone that was kind of chosen, but that pedestal was a little bit different, and so that it was just kind of vulnerable as a child to feel that. It felt a little bit isolating in a way from what I experienced and the way that the rest of the world saw reality as.
Yeah, it's just such a remarkable story, and I love how you remember so much from a young age, and it how that just made such a profound impact. And as you were growing up, when did you start to integrate some of the not really lessons, but just some of the information you received when you were on the other side?
That was always in and out of the forefront, ever since a young kid. As a result of suffocation, all parts of my body weren't functioning. The last part of, myself that I could feel in this body was my brain. And literally, I felt my brain snap in half due to the deprivation of oxygen. And that's when the spirit realm kind of came in. So, as the saying goes, my brain cracked in half and God came in. And so, after this near death experience and the brain trauma that I experienced, I was able to have the brain as not the creator of reality, but the filter of reality between two worlds. And I was able to connect to like a sliver of light going through my brain throughout childhood that lasted quite some time. And within this light, I was able to access the higher realms and have, dialogue with consciousness and higher awareness. And, I talk about this in Life After Breath. And so I lived in partnership with that. But, I think to survive, I almost needed to push that aside and be 2 feet here. But really, to thrive, I needed to make sense of it and integrate it at the right time. So it was probably my later teens when I was able to have the lexicon and more understanding of it in human ways, and being able to integrate it. But, as a kid, it was more of a nuisance than anything else, because having this, experience, which, forever changed my bioneurochemistry, I was prone to a lot of premonitions and awareness, of things that would happen, and then I would see them in front of me. And so to me, it would be almost annoying, these kind of things that would happen. And I would just feel like just very bothered or intrude that like something that I saw would just happen, or it would get flashbacks of previous lifetimes or connections to loved ones on the other side. And it wasn't like I was going around saying this is psychic information, this is past lives. To me, it was more of a nuisance where I was just trying to put this beach ball down, and bog it down to just kind of integrate. But eventually, the beach ball couldn't stay down for that much long, and it needed to come out. And once I did, my life forever changed. As a young adult.
Well, I know you're 30 now, and how has your perspective changed since that experience happened and from your growing up? I mean, I would assume that it's really impacted your life and also your work life.
Yeah, 31. Getting older. Turning 32 on the same day as Shirley MacLaine, April 24th, coming up. But what I would say is it took away the notion of anything being random or anything kind of limited to what we see as, and understanding that this life is guided, it's brightly guided. There's an intelligence far greater than our own, that goes, in the planning phase and goes in guidance, and so at least for me, it's kind of what living a life, congruent with what Einstein would say with our most important question that we have to live our lives by is the universe a friendly place, unfriendly place, or a place of ambivalence. And I learned to really, through this, NDE, to really trust, that behind all that we see, is a beautiful, intelligent, and loving force that is working with us, not against us, despite what it seems, especially these days, totally contrary at face value level.
What are some of the lessons that are really relevant for current times that you brought back with you?
Endless. And I'm actually working on a book right now. I'm almost finished. It's called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, which really focuses on a lot of the direct lessons from the hereafter to the here now. But I think it starts with self. I think once you remember who you are, we could have recollection who we are. And I don't think anything was random. I think something as potent as a near-death experience, that was meant to be. And there's a lot of karma, and dharma attached to my near-death experience, which hopefully we could get into later in the show. But it happened in all places in a playground, and I was a child, and that is very congruent with the allegory of a child in God's playground. How we all are our brothers and sisters keeper, here to play, but here to understand that it only works if it doesn't just work for ourselves, but it works for our neighbor and the next neighbor. And you find a way for us to integrate, the oneness, not just as a talking point, but as a principle that we live by in our daily experiences, and to have a cohesive effort to not only, survive, but to thrive, but also what's inside of us and all around us is infinitely greater, than the challenges in front of us. And I experienced the depths of, suffering through this endless period of suffocation and experiencing death of the body. And I could tell you that there are no goodbyes, there are no deaths, there's only continuity, there's only new beginnings. And, our life is non-linear. There's a continuity of our existence. There's a purpose of our existence. And throughout whatever we go through, however painful it is, on the other side of that, is an experience for our own expansion, evolution, and continual unfoldment of our own infinite spirit.
Having gone through an experience like that and seeing the problems that humanity has today, are you sometimes going, okay, this is really petty stuff. We need to get beyond this because you've seen the bigger picture.
All right. Yeah, it's sometimes hard, it's sometimes, it you feel like you're in PhD, and sometimes, others are on the monkey bars or in the playground or whatever, and it just kind of doing things that you were you know, doing 20, 30 lifetimes ago, and it's right in front of you. So it almost feels like a lot of the world is in a bit of a slumber and a bit of a death. To me, death is not fully aware, not fully mindful or present, and being a leaf in water versus generating your own current from the depth of your own being. And it's hard, but I think a lot of people, hopefully could really reflect on their own foundation as to where they're living their lives by. I think sometimes we have to be privy to the foundation of our life. If we're living from looking outside, then that's a foundation, or if we're turning inward, where we could live a life from a lot stronger, more prosperous, and more healing vantage point. And that way we don't have to wait till we go to heaven. We live from it, even in the body, even, um, in a felt degree of separation from that place.
What do you think is the purpose that some people have NDEs and others don't?
It's interesting. I mean, I think there's subjectivity to the soul's journey as well as, general collective, themes. But, this is going to sound self-aggrandizing, but it's just how I believe. I think near-death experiencers have a big mission in this life, and the population is growing as science and medicine is enhancing the incubational period between the two worlds. But what I would say is, I think the biggest fear that we have is our own death, so to speak. I think that's the biggest question. And from going to that place, we could give those droplets of heaven and awareness to other people. And from going through the depths of suffering that a lot of near-death experiencers, myself included, we could be able to recognize that the light is found in even the darkest of places, even in death. There's an eternal light behind what we label as death. That there's only continuity, there's only light, and that's all that there is at the end of the day. And much like Wayne Dyer would say, you squeeze out an orange, you get orange juice, and you squeeze out the soul, you get love and eternity. Everything else goes away. And we have to live our lives with a broader perspective to get through some of the tests from moment to moment that we could all be swayed by, and have a broader perspective, in our approach. But I think it also there's a sacrificial element to near-death experiencers. When you experience that degree of trauma and suffering that goes through it, there's still the human integration part of it, and as well as coming back from there and in a world that isn't as awake as what you experience, and just feeling, for a lot of it could be very isolating and very alone. And I know I certainly felt that way, where I felt I was awake to this stuff and the rest of the world was asleep in many ways, and that was not easy. It felt like I just didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be on this earth, but we just know that this isn't necessarily about us, but it's so much more than us, and we're here to not have the book sit on the bookshelf, but to have people literally, metaphorically read that book and integrate that information, in their everyday lives.
Well, you brought up a good piece, talking about people who are, when we talk about the death process, how many people are so afraid of that. When I look at near death experiencers, my thought is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I have not had one. My thought is that people who have had NDEs are in some way kind of here to help people get over that fear and to talk about the other side in ways that they can understand and feel comfortable with.
Absolutely. And if I'm known as the afterlife guy, I will never be happy at the end of the day, because I used to take monopolization over my experience and held it very close to my heart, which is very common of near-death experiencers, by researchers. But once I was able in my young teens to read, a book on a near-death experience, I for the first time had a vernacular. I'm like, wow, this has a term to it. And later, coincidentally befriended the man who coined the term near-death experience, Dr. Raymond Moody, who's on my cover. But I would feel a sense of loss if that happened because I want people when they hear my talk or hear other near-death experiencers to not put that person or the experience in a pedestal, but to have lesser degrees of amnesia and to remember and see the reflection in that person is an experience in the doorway of awareness of their own eternity, and to have a little bit of recall that they too come from there, go to there. They too are free, unencumbered, magnificent, powerful spirits, far greater than their own judgment and what the world sees them as in many ways from judgment. So, you know, I hope it's empowering that people hear near death experiencers and they see a reflection in themselves and they take ownership of their own eternity.
I think that's such a valuable piece that you bring to the world because, without it, I think a lot of times people will be like, well, is any of this even real? And, how about the other side? And, I'm worried about my loved one. So you can kind of see where that would go.
Yeah, I roll up my sleeves. According to many psychologists, the two biggest fears are public speaking and death. And I talk about death during public speeches. So I, I live my life in accordance with my near-death experience, where throughout most of my life, I was a very shy, withdrawn kid. The human stuff scares me, but when it comes to helping out someone or going to the depths of life, I have no fears. And I think it's important to be able to go there because once you sensitize yourself, you recognize, wow, you have nothing to fear but fear itself. In many ways, not always. Fear is not always. There's fear. Fear has a purpose. Someone comes to you with a gun in your head. It's don't tell me you're not going to be afraid. I mean, that's a very human part. But we're talking about going to the depths of darkness and being able to be empowered with light governing our lives versus fear, governing our lives.
So let's talk about just how this all integrates with your work. I mean, you're this great psychotherapist and you've had this ND experience. I mean, how does the soul consciousness kind of bridge the two for you?
I try to be great. I mean, you'd have to ask my clients that I just spoke to this morning how great I am. I mean, they have the say in me, right? But it's a very great question, Marianne. I would say, at least for me, I was, at the depths of, suffering and deprivation of life force. And to me, it was utmost restored in my near-death experience. And so for me, I could hold on to this and say, wow, I'm thankful. Or I could, say, hey, wow, I'm going to dedicate my life to give back the life that I was given, during this near death experience and long before I got here in this body to people who literally and metaphorically are feeling lifeless. You know, that's my whole goal, is to empower people to really tap into a greater gear of their life, when they're feeling stuck or feeling, setback. Um, you know, I think that's all of my life is really trying to give back what I was given and just to recognize how beautiful we are and how much more we have inside of us and the superpower of love inside of us and all around us as something that we can integrate on a daily basis, far greater than our own, apathy, depression, and human feelings.
Well, I appreciate you going into that because I just find it so fascinating with the field you're in here. You're helping people, you're, teaching people about NDEs and how that experience can impact their lives.
Mm.
And you're a speaker and you also do energy healing. When did the energy healing kind of take root for you?
Uh, you know, um, in high school when classmate used to have some back pain, or even one of my teachers, I was the guy that people go to. I was just kind of like a young medicine man, and I would massage and put my hands on their shoulders, and I just gravitated to it. And it's something that we do, and we don't even notice. For instance, we fall, we immediately put our hand on that area, or have someone hug us, and there's something very valuable, in healing about the work of our hands and energy work. But it was really, like I said, to give back what I saw in my near-death experience. In my near-death experience, I was awakened to a field of endless angels that was in front of me, right a couple ticks right above this earth plane, right here in front of us, you know, with us. And I saw the energy healing that was coming from those angels. And I said, wow, they're sending healing, they have that in them. And we could too, you know, be angels, angels in human form. We could too, transmute our own energy for the greater good. And it starts with our thoughts and our intention, our attention to our intention, and really surrendering to that light. And that's what I did in my near death experience when, my body wasn't working and the light saved me from the depths of darkness. And that's what I do in my Reiki sessions, where I just surrender and allow the energy or the life force, which Reiki means in, Japanese language, universal life force, and just allow that to come not from me, but through me to my clients. And, it's nice to see that it has some benefit from clients who come to me in person or clients that I even see in Australia and I do, remote Reiki sessions on. I love Reiki to be a part of my everyday life.
Well, it seems like you were just born for that, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, how would you know where to put your hands or even use your hands, as a young person? I think that that's very remarkable.
Yeah, you got to obviously, I was trained throughout many years with Reiki from, the Dr. Mikao Sui Reiki training program, who was really a guy, who founded this energetic healing system, in Mount Koriyama in Japan. And it kind of came to him, telepathically, the different symbols. But like anything else, it gives you a licensure to practice, and then after that, you got to expand it. You got to make it your own. And so I do a lot of different things, within my practice from EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is, tapping, different tuning forks, sound vibrations. I incorporate a lot of aromatherapy, within my clients. And more importantly, I teach my clients after the session, how to utilize some of the different mind body techniques so that they don't need me. They could do this on their own. This is just a tune up, but they could, you know, not just hold their breath and come to my office, but be able to breathe on a regular basis and work out some of those inner kinks that they're going through, on a multitude of levels.
It seems that breath is connected with everything that you do, and it's interesting just with the work you do, how you're helping people. I just really applaud you for that because everything does come down to the breath, right?
Yeah, I know my book title is Life After Breath, which is a homage to Raymond Moody's Life After Life, out of respect. But I experience life after breath, but breath is life, whether that be in the physical body or before we, after this physical body, we're connected to the breath of eternity. And so when we breathe, it's not something just, physical. We're breathing in the breath of our spirit, the breath of higher consciousness. And that's why I say when we inhale, we inspire, we exhale, we experience that new elevated state. And so breath is a completely restorative and not just physical, but it's for the soul. And yeah, I think that's important. But and that's why I utilize a lot of mindfulness, within one-on-one sessions as well as running a lot of big groups, because I find mindfulness to be the most important, significant part of our everyday life. I really do.
And for people who are new to mindfulness,
Yeah.
what do you suggest? I mean, how do you wake up in the morning and start your day?
Yeah. Yeah. Mindfulness is, really been the last couple of years, it's really been a part of our culture. And, you go to the supermarket now, you see, all these magazines, but it's kind of like having a mind of the Buddha in the West in our world, right? And we're able to think and live through that Eastern, viewpoint. And, by that I mean, you know, I know the founder of mindfulness here, in the United States, really one of the pioneers, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, would say mindfulness is living as if your life depends on each moment. And it does, If we're not present in the present, then what are we? And so it's being able to be fully aware, but beyond that, it's being aware of our foundation. If we're mindful and we have angry thoughts, depression, anxiety, we have to find a way to um, kind of pivot and get back to a mindfulness that's based off of compassion, empathy, wisdom, and to look not at life but through life. And so it's a beautiful practice. And the more that we practice it, it's not that we don't get off kilter, but we're able to pivot that much easier from increased self-awareness. But I view it as kind of like sitting in a lotus, but doing that, 24/7 in our lives and having that same awareness, with our ability to engage with the stimuli of life in our own response, which gives us the freedom to choose, our engagement with life.
I
So
find that
it's,
fascinating how that all comes together, and thank you for going over that. It's
yeah, yeah,
there's just it's so much great information. I know one of the things that you had brought up, and I'd love for us to dive into, is karma versus dharma.
yeah, yeah. You know. Well, yeah. One last thing about mindfulness is it's like the way I see it is the world not creating your mind, but your mind creating your world, right? So it's living the inside out versus outside in. Does that make sense? I hope
Hmm.
listeners will understand. That's a much different juxtaposition than what we've been accustomed to, in this world. But yeah, karma. I like what Dr. Deepak Chopra often refers to, and when he says karma is our story, but dharma is kind of like what we do with it in a way, in our purpose. And so I think a lot of people go around, you know, consciously or subconsciously repeating patterns and stories of life. This person did that to me, this happened, that happened. And there could be, almost kind of like a victim mindset. And dharma is not having the story but define you, but you defining the story in a way, and you finding meaning, you finding growth. So this happened to you, and how did you transform that? And I look at my near-death experience as a way to understanding, you know, transformation. I mean, there's nothing more transformative than the soul continuing, past the body. And the same thing within the darkness and depths of our own lives, that we are transformational beings beyond this body. We are also transformational beings capable of doing that within this body, from life events, from grief to growth, so to speak, or, all those kind of things. And it's very hard to find someone who doesn't have a pivotal influence in society who hasn't gone through the depths of darkness or, the rising out of the ashes and being the phoenix. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting because of the connection of the both. When we look at dharma and karma, a lot of times people get a little, maybe they don't quite, um, I wouldn't say understand, but really fully grasp what that all entails. And
Hmm.
so I'd love for you to just kind of break that down.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to past lives, we have a purpose, and I view that as our dharma, which is to really overcome some of the narratives that we've had in different lifetimes, some of the stories, and to find ways to redefine that story and to remove, any of that. And it's not that we're punished. We could view, everything is how we frame it. We could view it as a punishment, or we could view each lifetime as an opportunity, to be grateful for our own evolution. But within different lifetimes, we have different kind of narratives that come into play that we've kind of like continued or piggyback. And I say from completion we begin many times, but within different lifetimes we have the ability to move the needle of our soul from lessons being embraced, so that we're able to move the needle of each experience, if that makes sense. And so it's a very transformative situation, the stories of our soul for our ability to find purpose and meaning, and burning off some of the tendencies of our soul and engaging the chessboard more skillfully within life events, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we all come back here to really kind of figure out how to hone in certain skill sets. And for me, it feels like a flow, just a flow that goes back and forth. depending on what we learn. Maybe we did really good this lifetime. Oh, maybe not so good that lifetime. Now
Mm.
we got to, come back. So that it feels like in many ways it's like pendulum swinging.
Yeah, and each experience, what we label as good or bad, is just an experience. I think in our world we're very black and white with how we judge a situation, but this is not so much about the final destination because there's no final destination. It's about the journey of the soul, and journey is eternal, and each lifetime has its own different purpose, that could be judged good, whatever that is, but either way, it's an experience. And when you think of the one of the biggest achievers, at least in the Western world and modern day history, and just the face of hard work, dedication, just alpha in his field. I was once watching Kobe Bryant in an interview, passed away, crossed over around this time 2 years ago, and he was asked, "What do you think of failure?" He said, "Oh, I don't know what that is. What's failure?" He said, "If you make a mistake Monday but learn from it Thursday, then what is that?" And so I think what he's trying to get at is, if we learn from something, then that's growth. And at the other side of what we view as failure could be a great opportunity to grow too, and that we're not done from that one situation. That we have the ability to transcend that setback to a step forward.
Such wise information. And it's interesting. People go throughout their entire lifetime sometimes and don't even, you know, they have a difficult time getting that.
Yeah, I mean we're very disempowered from a very young age. It's like you do well, you feel like a victor. You do something bad, you're so it's no wonder why there's so much instability and identity and how we feel about ourselves because it's focused on what we do instead of the being underneath the doing. And so we're not called a human doing, we're called a human being. And it's in the being, that and so each experience that we have, it's not a definition of our character, but just an experience and something that we could learn from. Um, but there's a transactionalism that we have within our actions that's non-reflective of our soul from a broader perspective. We're not necessarily loved for what we do, but we're loved for who we are, which is much more than what we do. We're not looked down in judgment, we're looked up at, from the spirit realm.
Well, it's interesting how many people really, there's so much negative talk, that they have going on about themselves. So to get beyond that is, I think, sometimes a challenge.
Yeah, I try to live my life as to how would God see this, viewing it from the mind, of understand the mind of God, the mind of spirit, whatever you want to label that as, and just to kind of think like God and to see the world through that God lens. And that starts with yourself. It starts with you. You know, um, I was once getting a reading, and the person said, "Why do you doubt yourself?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Do you not come from the seed of God or, the universe, whatever you call it?" And so the same seedlings, in you is in the ascended masters, is comes from God. So to doubt you is to doubt God, if that makes sense, or to doubt the universe. And we have to believe that inside of us, at our core, is that beautiful divine spark. And once we're able to see that, everything changes. It's like if you have a beautiful car, you're going to have respect for it. You're going to take good care of it. But if you don't see it that way, it's going to change. And so a lot of this work is about self-esteem, healthy self-esteem, and awareness of ourselves beyond our own judgment. And loving ourselves, beyond that judgment or beyond the label.
I love how you put that, that we're really looking through the, eyes of God in how we approach our day. I think if a lot of people looked at it that way, it would be such a different life we'd be living.
Yeah, yeah. Just transcending what we've been taught to really be empowered with what's inside of us. You know, what we've been taught is, you know, I do well, I knock you down in this doggy dog world. That's good, but really, this world is dependent on our interdependence, and each soul to have their own ability to transcend, succeed, and so it's a collective effort, not individualistic level. And soul understands that it's not just about my experience, but my ability to integrate myself and others, and to make this a more soulful world. But yeah, that's a beautiful place, and it's all about how the vantage point of how we see things. What our vantage point is. Is that coming from the ego, which views life as a competition of being right versus wrong, and trying to prove a point, or the soul, which is tries to harmonize, as a collateral.
Well, and I think a lot of people would prefer being able to be in harmony, because I mean, there's so much discourse going on, and most of it is people trying to get to a place of happiness, of where they feel fulfilled.
Yeah, yeah. I really follow, the late Dr. Wayne Dyer's work, and I loved what he once said, where what is speaking in reference to vantage point is we have to be careful of where we're turning our life towards, where we're facing. We're facing the outside world, look around us. There's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of good, but instability. But if we turn inward, and we live our lives from that place, we really have a beautiful vantage point of living our lives from in a greater depth. And that's so true. And that's something that I try to live my life from a deep gear, not just being a leaf in water, but generating this beautiful current far greater than my own thoughts, my own, awareness, and having that, ride with me. And that's like we said, like being in flow with spirit, what Bruce Lee talked about, be like water, being in flow with not the outer world, but the inner world as our flow.
I know that you share about how your NDE includes awareness of nonlinear consciousness
Mm,
with awakening
mm,
to beings on the other side and also past
mm.
memories. I'm sure we have some people going, okay, what was all of that she just said? And how does that break down and relate to me?
Yeah. What I would say is our story goes beyond this chapter that we view it as. I experienced that who I was far more than a personality, a gender, or body that I saw myself. I was just temporarily experiencing that. But beyond the personality is an eternal, timeless soul. And with that soul is the whole team of beings, that are around us, at all times, and that we're connected to. Some of these beings carnate within this life, some of them, hang around. But this life is very much of a team collaborative effort. I think the biggest piece of illusion is and event and issue of suffering is people feeling isolative and not feeling that rallying degree of support around them, you know, and that couldn't be further from the truth. But past lives, it's not a matter of belief. I mean, right now, there are just so much evidence behind it and, hard case studies. If you look at for instance, the University of Virginia and all their, different case anecdotes of different examples and evidence behind those, it is just mind blowing. So, I think it's very important to have a degree of skepticism, but to find a boundary with skepticism and cynicism, in one's understanding and development.
Do you feel that past life regression and maybe knowing about our past lives has benefit for us in this life?
Absolutely. For instance, it's kind of like within our own lives, if we're able to process things, from previous events, we're able to make different decisions and not subconsciously make those, continual patterns. In many ways, we're creatures of habits, but sometimes our habits are unhealthy. Sometimes our habits are not within the way of skillfulness or resourcefulness. And so we could become aware of certain habits, worldviews that we carry over, as well as, depathologize things such as our greater gifts and why we are the way that we are, and having ways to continue to evolve, that story. But it is very versatile in the resourcefulness and the help that it could give to each particular client that comes into my room or works with another practitioner. It's amazing.
I often hear about how people who have like life trauma that just shows up at like age 30, which you are now 31, but
Mm.
that just kind of shows up and they don't understand why. Maybe like a fear of water or something like that, and how having a past life regression helps to heal that.
Absolutely. Very little of our life is actually processed through conscious reasons, things that we're aware of, and so much of it is processed through subconscious memories that even go back beyond this. And so I believe everything has a reason. There's a cause and effect for why we view the world or feel the way that we feel. And past life is able to go into the point of entry, at times when the disc is a bit jammed on the CD, or we're just kind of like stuck, and to be able to get into a greater groove so that we can move the needle forward within, the period of stagnation.
How these experiences, have shaped you. What's the feedback that you've received from people in regards to having a past life regression?
You know, it depends. I've seen a lot of shifts within my groups and clients. At the very least, you coming to me, you're going to be in a very relaxed state. I don't guarantee at first session or second session that, I don't attach myself to results, but I think it's kind of like going to the gym with your subconscious mind. And the more that you use it and the more that you're able to understand letting go as the biggest muscle that we could utilize in our lifetimes, the more susceptible you are to get into the deeper hypnoidal states that would allow you to go even further into your subconscious mind to memories before this life. And so, like anything else, the more you use it effectively and the more you're able to let go, it works. We are all capable of hypnosis. We do it through daydreaming or through highway hypnosis. And, so too, we have the ability to go into deeper hypnoidal states, but, it's all about the ability to surrender and to let go, which is a fear. Most people are more comfortable holding on than to letting go, which explains, why, there's so many issues with people that are experiencing, it's through letting go that our consciousness could grow.
Since you've had the NDE experience and you've got this great insight, how does that relate to religion? Does religion factor in at this at all, or is it more just how we have our spiritual connection to Father?
Yeah, I'm not one to knock one's religious practice. I think everyone evolves and looks at life through, their own lens, but the key is their own lens. I think religion is something that we learn, something within a set belief system, so there's almost, kind of a close-endedness to it. It's an outside belief system, which is in spirituality, it's a lot more personalized, and it's not a belief system. It's more of a knowing, and it goes within something that's very subjective to ourselves as well as very much collectively based. So I kind of like, view it as a prism. I'd rather focus on the light than the prisms that the light is shining through the human filter and the human story. And so for me, I'm much more focused on the beauty of the light within versus, some of the prisms of that light that we've been told. Does that make sense? But there's many
Yeah.
ways and many paths up to the mountain. But at the end of the day, it's, this light transcends a lot, all these different angles to understand it, if that makes sense. It includes but transcends it too.
People pick up your book, Life After Breath.
Mhm.
What do you want them? Let's like what the number one takeaway you want them to go away with.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a cousin in Tucson, Arizona, who also is a child near-death experiencer, and she's an intuitive. So I'm very close with her, and she picked up my book and she said, you know, this book, the energy that I'm getting is inspiration. And I said, I agree. This book is meant to really inspire. Life After Breath is a bit of my karma. It's more of a memoir. It's my story. But I did that so that people could see themselves in it and to take ownership of their own spirituality and their own awareness and their own eternity. And the next book I'm working on is more of the Dharma, more of the purpose, more of the meaning. And so there is that within Life After Breath. But I really wanted people to really relate to the near-death experience so that they could be owned it. But it's, really a great way to kind of stretch the soul and It's a fun read, it's enjoyable, and it's a roller coaster, but it's a story that I think could speak on a universal basis to people.
Do you find that as you're growing and maturing in your spirituality, that you're gaining new wisdom from the NDEs that you've had?
Every day, it's nothing close-ended because I connected to the place of eternal open-ended awareness. And so having an experience with the afterlife didn't give me a monopolization of it, but rather a quest to really see it in everyday grace. And so every day is a moment to see the divine and see the eternity unfold so that we don't have to hold our breath to be aware or awake. We could be awake while we're awake. We could live from that vantage point. So absolutely, we're never at that final place. We're always continually unfolding and developing because we're eternal,
Oh my
and that's a
goodness.
beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful thing. Oh my goodness, Jacob. I mean, I could talk to you forever. I loved your book. That's why it's a book club pick of the month. And
Thank you.
so we'll have that there where everyone can see it. Where's your website where people can connect with you and be part of your community?
Yeah, my website is jacoblcooper.com. That's jacoblcooper.com. And there you could find my social media links, and you could email me for inquiries and appointments and services as well too. So it's all there, pretty spelled out, I hope. So,
Well, Jacob,
as well
thank
as my
you.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, your book and all the great stuff there. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Marianne, thank you for having me. A true honor.
Well, thank you, Jacob. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Life After Breath. Life After Breath is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And, of course, support our indie bookstores. Again, if you'd like to connect with Jacob, you can at jacoblcooper.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.